Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep. Welcome to our module on internal security. Today we are beginning with a new subject, a very interesting subject. So before we start, kindly let me know if I am clearly audible and visible. Can you please let me know in the comments? Perfect. So today we'll be starting with internal security. So as the first class, I will give you some basic introduction to the subject. We will understand the syllabus. We shall understand the importance of the subject, how you should approach the subject, how should you prepare for it. Then we will start with some introductory concepts. And after that, we will take up some important chapters. So internal security essentially deals with the national security of India. So we will cover several interesting and dynamic topics. The subject becomes automatically interesting because of the kind of topics it deals with. It deals with terrorism, border management, intelligence operations of India, cybersecurity. All these are extremely interesting topics. Luckily for you, it's a very small subject. But don't neglect the subject because it's a small subject. Because internal security is very important. It is relevant with other subjects as well. It is closely connected to many other subjects. You can easily answer these questions. You can score very well in these questions. I hope you know that internal security is part of your GS paper 3. If you look at the UPSC syllabus, the subject is part of GS paper 3. After Indian economy, science and technology, environment ecology, etc., at the end, we have this subject called internal security. Now, I'm insisting that this subject is important because in your mains examination, you will get 4 direct questions from internal security. So don't neglect by thinking it's just 4 questions. In UPSC exams, every single mark counts. And the best part is that you can score very well in all these 4 questions. Is that clear? You will get 4 direct questions from internal security alone. And as I told you, it's a multidisciplinary subject, meaning it is connected to many other subjects, which is part of our syllabus. It has close connections with international relations. I'm sure some of you would have attended my IR classes. Even there, we studied about terrorism, border issues, border security. Correct? So those topics are present here as well. Topics like cybersecurity, money laundering, border management, they are all connected with internal security and international relations. So the IR questions you get in GS paper 2 will also be connected with internal security. At least some of your IR questions can be answered by using your knowledge of internal security. And the subject is also connected with polity, with economy, and even with some aspects of history and geography. So whatever you study here will be relevant in other subjects as well. Kindly remember this. Even though it is largely a mains oriented subject, you can even expect some prelims questions if you are lucky. See, it's not a prelim specific subject, it's a mains oriented subject. But the topics are such that there can be some prelims questions. Maybe you will get 2 or 3 questions, maybe 4 or 5 questions in prelims, which is also a considerable chunk of questions. Because we'll study about India's security forces and security agencies. We will study some concepts under cybersecurity, money laundering. So all these basic factual topics can come as a prelims question. So as a result, the small subject of internal security becomes very important for your exams. Is that clear? And especially if you're opting for IPS as one of your services in the top 3 services, you will get a lot of questions from internal security in your interview, in your personality test as well. Is that clear? So that is why the subject is extremely important for your exams. You cannot neglect this. In fact, you stand to gain by paying attention to this subject. It's easy to cover, very simple to complete the syllabus. And once you're thorough with the subject, you can ensure that you answer well in all these questions that come in your prelims and mains and even in the interview. Is that clear? Now, let us take a look at the syllabus that UPSC has given for us. I'll take you through the syllabus so that you understand what kind of topics we are going to cover. I'll explain the approach that I will be taking in the class to complete the syllabus. We'll also discuss what material you should refer, how you should approach the subject, and then we'll start with the introductory concepts. So if you look under GS paper 3, in the end, you find these 5 topics to be mentioned. If you look at the UPSC notification, the syllabus is very clearly mentioned, and these are the 5 major topics given by UPSC. We are going to study the linkages between development and spread of extremism. In fact, this is going to be the first chapter. We are going to study this today. We will understand how development is connected with extremism. If a region is not well developed, if a region has been neglected by the government, such underdeveloped areas, backward areas, remote areas can become vulnerable for the rise of extremism. So that is the interconnection that we are going to understand. And the vice versa is also true. One way to tackle extremism is to provide for better development in the affected region. So that is why we have to understand the linkages between development and extremism. The next topic is the role of external state and non-state actors in creating security challenges to our internal security. What is the role of external state agencies? What is the role of non-state actors? How do they threaten our security? That is what we are going to understand. I hope all of you understand the term state actors and non-state actors. Can some of you give examples? If you know what state and non-state actors mean, can you give me an example of a state actor? Raghav says Pakistan. Okay. Shreyank Kuraku, they're saying ISI. Okay. Kishan says NIA. Funny says state actors can be spy agencies. Very good. All of you have got it right, almost right. A state actor refers to any government entity. If I just say state actor, it refers to any government organization. It could be an organization of the Indian government. It could be the CBI, the Intelligence Bureau, Indian Army, Ministry of External Affairs, DRDO, ISRO. All these are state agencies. These are state actors because they're part of the Indian government. Similarly, when we say external state actors, we are referring to foreign state agencies. We are referring to the government organizations of foreign governments. So it could be the Foreign Ministry of Pakistan, the State Department of the United States, the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency of the US, the ISI of Pakistan, as many of you have mentioned. All these are external state actors. Foreign state agencies belonging to foreign governments, they become your external state actors. Sometimes these foreign state actors, they work closely with non-state actors, with non-government entities. They use non-government entities to create security challenges for us. It could be a hostile country which is trying to target India, or sometimes it could be friendly countries as well who are trying to destabilize India. So foreign government agencies often work with non-government entities such as a terrorist group, or they might be working with organized criminal cartels and organizations, or it could be a private company or a non-government organization, a NGO, or it could even be a media outlet. Any such non-state entity is a non-state actor. Is that clear? Any organization, any entity which is not part of a government is a non-state actor. So it could be a media outlet, a private company, a NGO, even a terrorist organization, a criminal organization, a pirate group, etc. All these are non-state actors. Sometimes foreign governments, they use non-state actors to target other countries. This is part of geopolitics. Is that clear? So hostile countries like Pakistan or China, their intelligence agencies might sponsor some non-state actors against India. Like how Pakistani ISI, which is Pakistan's foreign intelligence agency, how it sponsors terrorism against India. That is an example of state actors working with non-state actors to create security problems for India. Even friendly countries, sometimes, their intelligence agencies might work with non-state actors to create security threats for India. So this is exactly what we are going to study under the second chapter. Now, what I will do is, I'm going to club the first two chapters. I'll take a slightly different approach from what UPSC has given to make it easier and simpler for you to understand, so that we have a good structure to cover the syllabus. I'll be taking the first two chapters and I'll club this and divide this into three major topics. The first topic will be left-wing extremism, also known as Naxalism in India. This will be the first major chapter that we are going to study. Then we are going to look at Northeast insurgency. The various insurgent movements that have affected Northeast India will be a separate topic that we are going to cover in detail. Then we are going to talk about state-sponsored terrorism. That is, foreign countries sponsoring terrorism against India, along with religious fundamentalism. How radical religion could be misused to trigger terrorism and create a threat for India. So under state-sponsored terrorism and religious fundamentalism, we are going to look at the Khalistan movement, which has been a major security threat. It has been quite in the news over the last 1 year as well. We are going to talk about the extremism seen in Kashmir, the terrorism and insurgency that we have witnessed in Kashmir, which is largely sponsored by Pakistan. We're going to study this in detail. We are also going to study the global scenario with regard to terrorism. We are going to look at the global angle as well. We are going to discuss the major terror groups of the world and understand what kind of threat they pose to India and to the international community. Of course, we'll also study India's response to terrorism, how India is countering terrorism, how India is countering Naxalism, how have we tackled Northeast insurgency. So all these topics will be covered as part of the first two chapters that UPSC has given for us. Is that clear? So this is something you should be aware of. I'm going to take the first two chapters and divide this into left-wing extremism, Northeast insurgency, and religious fundamentalism. So this will help us cover a number of important topics, and in fact, we will pay maximum attention to these topics. This is where you'll get a lot of questions from. All right? Then after that, the next chapter is very interesting. Challenges to internal security through communication networks. Role of media and social networking sites in internal security challenges. Your communication platforms can be misused. Your media outlets, social media platforms, and the internet in itself can be misused by terror groups or foreign state actors to create security problems. I'm sure you know that through media and social media, fake news can be spread. Misinformation can be spread. Propaganda can be carried out. This becomes a security challenge. So that is exactly what we will study under this chapter. We are also going to study the basics of cybersecurity. In today's world, cybersecurity has become extremely important. Everywhere we are witnessing a rise in cyber crimes, which is posing a threat to our economic stability, which is threatening our citizens. Citizens are losing their hard-earned money. They're compromising their data privacy, their identity because of cyber criminals. Cyber warfare has become a reality today. Countries can be brought down without even firing a single bullet, without going to a physical war. Through a virtual cyber war, countries can be defeated today. So it's very, very important to understand the basics of cybersecurity and where India stands with regard to cybersecurity. Next, we are going to study money laundering and its prevention. Money laundering is another major threat. It's a topic related to economy, but money laundering is not just an economic threat, it's a national security threat as well. So we are going to understand what is money laundering. How does it threaten our security? How is money laundering carried out? What is India doing to counter money laundering? Is there any global framework to counter money laundering? So all these topics will be covered under this important chapter. Then we come to a small topic that mainly focuses upon border management and border security. Because security of the nation is largely dependent on border security and border management. Because many threats which are external to India, they come from the outside, especially from our neighboring countries. India shares a long land boundary and a maritime boundary. So this is where the threats can sneak in and enter into our country. You would have heard about terrorists infiltrating from Pakistan to India, Northeast insurgents infiltrating from Myanmar and Bangladesh into India, criminals, organized criminals who are smuggling drugs, trafficking arms and weapons, right? They sneak across the borders into our country, and this creates a security challenge. So one way to improve the country's security is to strengthen our border security, to improve our border management. So this is another important chapter which we are going to study here. Now, please remember, organized crime terrorism and insurgency and money laundering. These three threat actors, they are interrelated. They are connected to one another. It's a very, very important concept that I am giving you at the very start of the subject. This connection will keep coming up throughout our discussion. Throughout all the classes, I will keep mentioning how terror financing is connected to money laundering, how organized crime is connected to terrorism and insurgency, how money laundering and organized crime are connected to each other. So there exists a direct connection between these three threat actors. Is that clear? So please make a note of this. It's a basic concept that you should be aware of even before I start with the subject. Organized crime is nothing but organized criminal activities which are run by large organizations, criminal organizations. You would have heard about the Dawood Ibrahim gang, the D gang. Dawood Ibrahim gang is involved in smuggling drugs, narcotics, smuggling arms and weapons. There are criminal cartels involved in human trafficking, wildlife trafficking. All these criminal activities run by organized criminal groups, they pose a threat to our security because they have direct connections with terrorists, insurgents, and money laundering channels. So that is the reason why we need to pay attention to all these threats. So we will understand the linkages of organized crime with terrorism and how it is connected to money laundering, how it enables terrorist financing. Then finally, we come to the last chapter. The last chapter is actually very factual. It's a very dry chapter, meaning it's largely factual in nature, where UPSC expects us to study the various security forces and agencies of India and their mandate. For example, India has a number of intelligence agencies. We have few armed forces. We have law enforcement agencies. We have few paramilitary forces. We have border guarding forces. So we should be aware of all the major security forces of India and the security agencies, and we should know what is their mandate. So since the subject, this particular chapter, the last chapter is very static, I'll make it more interesting by adding some current affairs to it. Wherever needed, we'll conduct an analysis so that the chapter becomes a little more interesting to study in a class. Also, it will be directly relevant for your exam. So essentially, these are the topics that we are going to cover in the next 10 classes. All right. Now, please note down that just like every other UPSC subject, internal security is also a mix of static and dynamic topics. It has a good mix of static concepts. There's a lot of history, background that we are going to study. And the subject is heavily driven by current affairs, current developments, especially developments happening in the last 2 to 3 years. They become more relevant for the exam. So you have to constantly stay up to date in this subject. You can't simply cover the classes and revise it once and close your book. It doesn't work like that. It's a very dynamic subject. It keeps evolving and changing. Every single day there will be developments. So reading newspapers, being in touch with current affairs is very, very important for the subject. Understood? It is heavily driven by the dynamic component. The static part is also important, but the current affairs part is even more important. So if this is clear, if the syllabus, the approach is clear, I will tell you what material you need for your preparation. Let me just open a new slide. Let us quickly discuss what material should you refer to cover the subject. All right. And after that, we can start with the class. The material needed for your preparation. I'm sure many of you will be asking, sir, which book to read? Should we read a textbook? Trust me, you don't need a textbook for this subject. Trust me when I say this. The subject is heavily dynamic. It's heavily driven by current affairs. Of course, there is a static part, but I'll cover that in class. What I teach in class should be more than sufficient along with current affairs. If you are reading a book, it should only be for your reference reading. So don't pay too much attention to a textbook because no single book can cover everything. A book written 4 years ago, 5 years ago will not really help you in the exam apart from the static part, apart from some concepts. Correct? So there's no point in relying on a textbook. You'll end up wasting your money and time. There are many good books in the market. If you want, you can just use one textbook for reference reading. Just for your reference reading. Read it like a storybook. Read it like a novel once. Highlight some key points. Make a note of it. Close the book. But otherwise, you don't need a textbook. Even if you skip reading a standard book, it is still fine. So, what should be your reading material? The class PPT, the class notes that you are going to make, and the additional reading material that we are going to provide. This will be your basic reading material. I've kept the PPTs as detailed as possible. A lot of relevant points have been added. A lot of maps, schematics have been added in the PPT itself. Along with that, I expect you to make short notes in the class. Keep a separate book for internal security. As and when I'm discussing, you have to jot down some of the important points. Wherever needed, I'll slow down. I'll repeat the point if it is more important. I'll highlight those points as well. So please make a note of it. Because in any class, making notes is very crucial. Don't expect spoon feeding. I'll not dictate notes. We're not in primary class. You have to make short notes. That is the best way to learn. That will help you stay attentive as well in the class, right? So use the PPT, make your short notes, use any additional reading material that we provide, and this becomes your basic reading material. Correct? Now, I will ensure that I will cover all the static part that is needed. I will cover current affairs as well. I'll keep the classes as up to date as possible. All right? But after the classes end, that is where your responsibility begins. After the classes, you have to stay up to date with regard to current affairs. You have to put in that extra effort. It's not even extra effort actually. In UPSC preparation, current affairs is part and parcel of any subject. So this is a part and parcel of your preparation, which you are already doing. So be in touch with your newspaper, either the Hindu or the Indian Express. Both are excellent newspapers that we have in the country. They are the few media outlets in the country which still maintain their integrity, their reporting standards. They cover several topics related to internal security, international relations, etc. They give you in-depth information actually. So if possible, read the newspapers on your own. There is no replacement for that. But if you're facing a difficulty here, let's say you're not understanding all the articles, or let's say you don't know how to approach newspaper reading, or you don't have time, then we provide you the Hindu analysis every day on our YouTube channel and also on the app. Watch the Hindu analysis video and try to make some notes out of it. Right? We keep it as detailed as possible. We cover a lot of important articles with the background. So that will give you plenty of updates regarding current affairs. Next, we have weekly webinars every Tuesday and Thursday. Weekly webinars are conducted for you to help you revise that week's current affairs. So please attend the weekly webinars without fail. Use the monthly magazine that we are providing for a quick monthly revision. This is something you have to do. All right? Your basic newspaper reading, watching the Hindu analysis, weekly webinars, monthly magazines. That will help you cover all the necessary topics. Apart from that, some basic websites. The website of Ministry of Home Affairs. Because MHA is the nodal ministry for internal security in the country. The Home Ministry is responsible for the internal security of the nation. So visit the MHA's website, navigate through the website, see if you can get some relevant information. Do this after the classes. Once we complete the syllabus, you will know what topics are relevant, what to study. So then visit MHA's website, spend a couple of hours on the website, navigate through various tabs, look at various departments, what are their functions, what initiatives have been taken, what updates have been given by the Home Ministry. So from here, you can write down some key points that will be helpful for your exam. The website of Ministry of Defense, the Defense Ministry, also deals with national security, the external security of the nation. The websites of various law enforcement agencies and security agencies of the country. The website of, for example, BSF, NIA, etc. So whenever you find some time, spend a little time on these websites, official government websites. Just go through, navigate the website, you'll get some relevant points from there. Then there are a few important think tanks that focus on security issues. ORF, Observer Research Foundation, and the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. These two think tanks in India conduct expert research into areas of geopolitics, national security, etc. So visit their websites, follow them on social media. ORF, Observer Research Foundation, and MP IDSA, Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. These are two major think tanks of India which work closely with the government, also partially funded by the government. IDSA is though entirely funded by the government. ORF is partly funded by the government. It's a private think tank. So these think tanks conduct expert analysis. They bring out research. So visit their website, read 1 or 2 articles from their websites every week. Spend just 15-20 minutes on their websites. Read 1 or 2 articles per week. That will give you a lot of information, lot of content, especially for your mains exam. So this is more than sufficient. Is that clear? The class PPT and the short notes you are going to make with additional reading material, which is your basic reading material. For current affairs, your newspaper, all the material we are providing through the Hindu analysis, weekly webinars and monthly magazine, and some basic websites. This is it. Trust me, this is very easy, very simple compared to other big subjects. If you can put this effort, attend all the classes, trust me, you can write very good answers for all the 4 questions. You can get all the prelims questions right and even answer other related questions in other subjects. So that is how important this subject can be. It can really help you score well in your exams. So I hope this is clear to everyone. I've spent a good 30 minutes in introducing you to the subject, in understanding the syllabus, and in helping you approach the subject. What material to cover, how to start with the subject, right? So with this, let's begin with our discussion today. Let's start with some basic concepts, and then I'll start with the first chapter, that is Naxalism or left-wing extremism. Don't worry, I'll take all your questions, all your doubts when we take a break in between. Is that clear? Let's continue the discussion for 1 more hour. We'll take a break after 1.5 hours, and then after the break, I'll take all your doubts, all your questions, and then we'll proceed with the further discussion. So first concept I'll be taking up is the concept of extremism, because we will keep using this term quite regularly in this entire subject. In fact, the first topic we are studying is left-wing extremism. So what do you mean by extremism? How is it connected to terrorism? Sometimes these terms are used interchangeably, right? Many times, instead of extremism, some people say terrorism, or instead of terrorism, people say extremism. So are they the same or are they slightly different? Is there any connection between them? That is something you should understand. So let us define what is extremism, and then you'll automatically understand how it is connected to terrorism. See, extremism is something as simple as believing in a radical thought. Extremism could be having a wide range. There exists a wide range within extremism. It's not a very simple, easy term to use. There is a wide range within it. A number of different kinds of activities get covered under the term extremism. It could be as simple as believing in an extremist view, advocating a radical thought. Now, let's say I believe that my religion is superior to every other religion. It's only my belief, my personal belief. Or let's say I believe that my political ideology is more superior and it should dominate over every other political ideology. Now, just by believing in such a radical extremist thought, I can be called as an extremist. So extremism could be something as simple as a belief or faith in a radical thought. See, anything that is outside of the norm can be termed as radical. Anything which is not normal. Believing that my religion is the only superior religion is not normal behavior. That is a radical behavior. It's a conservative behavior. It's an intolerant approach in the society. Because your belief can tomorrow lead to actual violence on the ground. It can lead to communal polarization. It can lead to religious violence, causing riots and instability on the ground. So the simple act of believing in a radical thought, having faith in a radical extremist ideology, can also be an act of extremism. Next, based on my radical belief, if I start advocating it, meaning I'll start promoting it. If I start doing this, then I have taken the next step in extremism. That is how extremism begins. It begins with an idea. It begins with a belief, a thought, a faith. The moment I start believing in an extremist ideology, next I might start acting upon it. Initially, it might be personal to me. It might be within my mind that my religion is superior, my political thought is superior. There's nothing wrong with that. But the moment I start acting upon it, if I start advocating it, if I start publicly promoting it, encouraging others to follow my ideology, that becomes the next step in extremism. Is that clear? The next step in extremism will be extending support to acts of violence in the name of the radical ideology. If your radical ideology is resulting in violence on the ground, if innocent civilians are being harmed, if security of the state is being threatened, and if you provide any kind of support to these violent elements, then you are an extremist. You have taken the next step in extremism. You might be providing direct support in the form of arranging weapons, supplying funds, providing shelter to extremists, or some kind of indirect support. Indirectly, you might be supporting a violent actor. So providing such direct or indirect support to those who commit violence is also an act of extremism. That is the next step in extremism. Then comes the final step. The final step where you commit the act of violence yourself. You become so radicalized, so extremist, that you're convinced that violence is the only path to sustain your ideology, to promote your ideology. Based on this radical belief, if you commit an act of violence, if you engage in actual violence on the ground, that is the final step in extremism, which can be labeled as an act of terrorism. If the objective of this act is to strike fear in the society, if it is harming innocent civilians, if it is resulting in mindless violence, then it can be labeled as an act of terrorism, which is the last step under extremism. Is that clear? So, in this final step, there are other types of extremism as well, such as insurgency. Insurgency is also a type of extremism. Then the other word we use is militancy. Militancy or insurgency, they are pretty much the same. They're very close to each other. Militancy or insurgency, they are also acts of violence, but they are slightly different from terrorism. So I will explain these differences in the next chapter. After we finish Naxalism, we will take up the next chapter. So there, I will explain the differences between terrorism and insurgency. Is that clear? We'll study that in detail. Right now, don't ask me that question. Sir, what is insurgency? What is terrorism? Don't ask me that. I will cover this in the next chapter. As of now, please understand that insurgency or militancy, terrorism, they are all different types of extremism. They are the last stage in extremism. And terrorism is the worst of all. If you have to ask me, which is the worst act in extremism, it is terrorism. Because terrorism results in striking fear in the society. It results in causing harm to innocent civilians. It results in mindless acts of violence, which is a violation of human rights. So terrorism is the worst form of extremism. All right. Insurgency is also the last stage in extremism, but insurgency and terrorism are different. Insurgency and terrorism are different acts of extremism. We are going to study this in the next chapter. The differences, I'll explain it in the next chapter. So this is the basic concept that you should be familiar with. Extremism can be inspired by a radical political ideology, or it could be inspired by religious fundamentalism. It could also be inspired by a perceived sense of injustice and genuine lack of development. Or sometimes it can be a combination of all these factors. For example, a radical political philosophy such as Maoism, which we call as Naxalism in India, this could lead to extremism and violence. So in that case, it is a radical political ideology which inspired the extremist movement. All right, we will study Maoism, Naxalism in today's chapter. Don't worry, I'll explain everything. Don't worry as to what is Maoism, what is Naxalism. I'll come to it. Right now, please understand, Maoism is a radical political ideology. It's a left-wing extremist ideology. If this radical political ideology leads to violence, if it leads to insurgency, it's an act of extremism. We say that it is inspired by this radical political ideology. Then religious fundamentalism, believing that my religion is superior and committing violence in the name of religion. Now, this is where I would like to issue a disclaimer. I would like to issue a cautionary note before we take up any other topic. This subject is a very sensitive subject. It's a very delicate subject. We will be dealing with many sensitive topics, including religious fundamentalism. Now, all that I expect from you is to be a mature audience. Because see, we live in interesting times today where it has become difficult to express your opinion. The very hallmark of a democracy is to have the right to freely express your thought, your opinion, and to discuss, to debate, to even argue. But today that climate has been very badly affected. From my end, I will promise to be unbiased. I will not show any political affiliation or religious affiliation. My personal belief is my personal belief. But I cannot bring that into class. Similarly, as UPSC aspirants, you have to be politically neutral, religiously neutral. Keep your religion, keep your political ideology at home. In a classroom, you should be able to discuss everything. That is called academic freedom. That is when you can debate, you can raise new ideas, you can discuss everything and argue and bring out different views and opinions. Understood? So I promise to be unbiased. I will not show any kind of religious bias or political bias. I'll remain neutral. I expect the same from you. And when I say neutrality, does not mean we hide facts. We have to discuss what is existing in the real world. If an act of terrorism is inspired by a radical religious ideology, I have to mention that in class. I have no other choice. Correct? Now, please note down, please make this very clear that no religion preaches extremism at its core. Be it Christianity, be it Hinduism, be it Islam, be it Judaism, Sikhism, or any faith, no faith preaches extremism. Every religion is beautiful in its own way. They all present a way of life. They present a code of conduct for the society. It inspires many people. It gives value to the lives of many people. So every religion has a great contribution to our society, to humanity. But unfortunately, in every religion, there is a strand of extremism. Be very clear about this. Never ever think that terrorism, extremism emanates only from one particular religion. Because I've seen this amongst a lot of students. There is a lot of Islamophobia. There is a lot of assumptions, presumptions that terrorism is emanating only from Islam. That is not the case. There is a strand of extremism in every faith, and the problem is not with religion. The problem is with selfish political elements who have misused their faith, misinterpreted their religion deliberately to serve their own interests. So you find extremism in almost every single religion. I can give you examples as well. In Christianity, there is extremism. In Islam, there is extremism. In Hinduism, there is extremism. Forget everything. In Buddhism, the religion of peace, which is built on the core principle of ahimsa, you find extremism. The best example would be Sri Lanka and Myanmar. Both are Buddhist majority nations, but unfortunately, the religion of peace has been misinterpreted. The radical Sinhala Buddhists in Sri Lanka have committed grave acts of violence and extremism against Tamil minorities. Today, they are targeting Muslims as well in Sri Lanka, the radical right-wing Sinhala Buddhists. The civil war that you would have studied in Sri Lanka between the Sri Lankan government and the Tamil rebels, it resulted because of the radical violence and extremism that Sinhala Buddhists displayed against Tamil minorities. Is that clear? And today, they are targeting the Muslim minorities in the country. You go to Myanmar, another Buddhist majority nation. The radical Buddhists who are aligned with Myanmar's military have committed grave atrocities against minorities, against various ethnic tribal groups, against minority communities like Rohingya Muslims. They have committed large-scale violence. So you look at Judaism, you look at Sikhism. Again, the Sikh faith is one of the most beautiful religions in the world. Majority of the Sikhs are peaceful, but there exists a strand of religious extremism, that is the Khalistan movement, is inevitably linked with a radical religious ideology. Now, the problem is not with any religion. Problem is not with Buddhism. Problem is not with Sikhism or Islam. The problem is with those elements who are misinterpreting their religion, misusing their own faith, giving it a wrong interpretation deliberately to serve their political interests, to serve their selfish interests. So that is why you have to be very clear on this. Religion has nothing to do with terrorism. But there is a radical strand of religion that exists in every faith, which has given rise to acts of extremism and terrorism. Is that clear? This is something you have to be very clear. Even in the examination, never display any kind of religious bias or political bias. Personally, you can have your belief. There's nothing wrong with it. That is your right. But as an aspiring bureaucrat, as an aspiring civil servant, as a responsible citizen, it is very important to develop a balanced view, a balanced opinion. Understood? So in the class, I will be discussing sensitive topics. I will talk about Wahhabism and Salafism. I will mention jihad. I will mention Hindutva. No one can take offense to it. That is what I expect from you. If you are neutral and unbiased, you will not take offense to it. So that we have a free environment where we can discuss everything, debate everything. If you don't agree with me, you can counter my point. You always have the right to counter that through the comment section, right? We will debate, we'll discuss. So from my end, I'll promise to be unbiased and neutral while discussing all these sensitive topics. So this is about extremism. Please make a note of these points. The discussion will come again. Right now, I've just given you a basic explanation of what is extremism. You've understood that extremism has a wide range. Different acts can be constituted as acts of extremism. Something as simple as having a radical belief, or advocating, promoting a radical thought, supporting radical violence, or committing the act of violence. They're all acts of extremism. So at the last stage, when you commit the act of violence, we bifurcate this into insurgency and terrorism. Both are different kinds of extremism, but the worst form of extremism is terrorism. Is that clear? So you can say that all terrorists are extremists, all insurgents are extremists, but not all extremists are insurgents or terrorists. I hope you understood the statement. Now, just because someone believes in a radical thought, you can't simply arrest them. Police cannot simply arrest a person who believes in a radical ideology. Is that clear? That itself is not a violation of the law of the land. If someone acts upon it, if someone is advocating, promoting a radical ideology, if someone is supporting violence, if someone is committing insurgency or terrorism, then that violates the law of the land. So just believing in an ideology or reading about it, studying about it, or even having faith in a radical ideology in itself is not a crime. So every extremist is not a terrorist. Every extremist is not an insurgent. Is that clear? But all terrorists and insurgents are definitely extremists. Because terrorism and insurgency, they are parts of extremism itself. They fall within the broad range, the broad spectrum of extremism. Understood? So you can expect a 10-mark question on this. In mains, UPSC can ask you, define extremism. What is extremism? How is it related to terrorism? So that could be a 10-mark question, right? So getting the concept right is very, very important. Now, as I told you, I'm going to divide this topic, the topic of extremism, into 3 different topics. We will take the first 2 chapters given by UPSC, that is linkages between development and extremism and role of state and non-state actors. I will take both the chapters, divide this into 3 major topics that we are going to cover. We are going to cover left-wing extremism, Northeast insurgency, religious fundamentalism, and terrorism. So today, we will start with left-wing extremism. Now, before we start with left-wing extremism, please take a look at the conflict map of India. I want all of you to be familiar with the conflict map of India. This is depicting the different conflict zones in the country. The different conflict zones in the country has been depicted in this map. I know it's an old map. It shows the whole state of Jammu and Kashmir, not the union territory of J&K and Ladakh. But we have to use the map because it serves our purpose, which is to understand the conflict zones of India. So the first major conflict zone that we will focus upon will be this belt, this region. The central and eastern parts of India with some parts of southern India. This is the region affected by Naxalism. We call this the Naxal corridor, also known as the Red Corridor. So Naxal corridor, Red Corridor, they mean the same. It refers to those states and districts in India which are affected by Naxalism, which is a type of left-wing extremism. All right. So under this chapter, we will be studying Maoism. We will study the Maoist political philosophy, which is a radical political ideology that has given rise to Naxalism in India. So this is the chapter on left-wing extremism. Next, the second major conflict zone of India, the Northeast region, where we will study Northeast insurgency. Is that clear? Since independence, the Northeast of India has been affected by insurgency. It continues even today. So there is a 75-year plus history to Northeast insurgency. Various states have been affected, from Assam to Nagaland to Manipur to Mizoram, Meghalaya. Several northeastern states, almost every northeastern state has been affected by insurgency. There have been multiple insurgent groups. In total, there have been at least 50 to 60 insurgent groups that have operated here. So we will take a look at this. We will understand Northeast insurgency in a separate chapter altogether. We'll study some of the most important insurgencies and we'll look at some important states and we'll look at the current status of Northeast insurgency. So that is the second conflict zone of India. Next, Punjab. We will discuss the Khalistan movement, how it has affected Punjab. What was the extent of Khalistan movement in the 1970s and 80s when Khalistan movement was at its peak? And today, there is discussion of an ongoing revival of Khalistan movement. In fact, I've been teaching this from the last 7 years, that since 2010, we are witnessing an attempt to revive the dormant Khalistan movement. The Khalistan movement was almost dead in 1990s. We had almost eliminated, wiped out this movement. But today, we are witnessing a sudden rise. You might have read in newspapers since the last 1 year regarding various pro-Khalistan activities in India and abroad. But trust me, it's not happening just in the last 1 year. It's been happening in the last 13 years. Since 2010, we have seen a proactive attempt in India and abroad to revive the dormant Khalistan movement. So it's a very important topic that we are going to discuss. So that is the third major conflict zone. Then finally, we have Jammu and Kashmir. We will study the militancy, the insurgency seen in Kashmir, the terrorism seen in Kashmir. We'll understand the Kashmir dispute, what role Pakistan has to play in this. How has Pakistan sponsored terrorism against India? How it has exploited the Kashmir dispute. So these are the 4 major conflict zones of India. We are going to cover all of them as part of our discussion on the first 2 chapters. All right? So if all these points are clear, I would like to start with left-wing extremism, which is the first chapter from according to my approach. So under left-wing extremism, we will basically study Maoism or Naxalism. So before we get into the depth of the chapter, I would like to introduce you to political ideologies such as left-wing and right-wing ideologies. Since I'm using the term left-wing extremism, you should know what is left-wing ideology, right? And if there is something called left-wing, obviously there will be something called right-wing as well, right? If there is left-wing ideology, there will be right-wing ideology. If there is left-wing extremism, there will be right-wing extremism as well. So what do you mean by these ideologies? You should have a basic idea. I'm sure many of you know about this. At least you have a basic idea as to what are these political ideologies. But there could be a number of beginners as well. And also it's good to refresh your memory and discuss these ideas. So let's talk about the different political ideologies that exist and what kind of political ideology cannot be tolerated in a modern civilized society. This will help you understand better with regard to left-wing extremism and right-wing extremism. Is that clear? So we'll spend some time on this, a few minutes on political ideologies, and immediately after that, I'll start with the first chapter. All right? So the last concept, the political spectrum. See, political ideologies can be plotted on a spectrum, meaning they can be represented on a scale, on a line, which we call as a spectrum. There are different kinds of political ideologies that exist in India and around the world. But broadly, they can be classified into left-wing ideology and right-wing ideology. Is that clear? These terms, they originated from France. They owe their origin all the way to the French Revolution and to the period before the French Revolution. In world history, you might have studied that France was a monarchy. Then came the French Revolution, where the monarchy was thrown out and a republic was formed. France adopted democracy and became a republic, right? So when France was still a monarchy ruled by the king, there were advisors to the king who sat on the left side of the king and right side of the king. Those who sat on the right side of the king, they all preferred status quo, meaning they didn't want any changes to happen in the society. They didn't want reforms. They were the conservative elements. They were the rich, elite, noble classes who were closer to the king, who were part of the royal elite. So those were the right-wing members advising the king. They would advise that we should maintain status quo. There is no need for social reforms. The divides that are there, the class divide, should exist, meaning the rich should remain rich, the poor should remain poor. Policies should be decided by the rich, by the nobles, by the elites, by the king. So these members who sat on the right side of the king, they were status quoist members, preferring a status quo, preferring the order that was there in the society. They didn't want changes or reforms, so they basically preferred tradition. They prioritized religion. They gave supreme priority to the king. They believed the king is the supreme authority. The king is the biggest decision maker. So those holding these beliefs that religion is more important, tradition is more important, the existing social structure has to be preserved, no social reform should be carried out, the rich and noble, they should make decisions. Those who held such belief, they were the status quoist members sitting on the right side of the king. So that kind of ideology became right-wing ideology. On the other hand, there were few other advisors sitting on the left side of the king. They preferred social change. They challenged the authority. They said the class divide should be eliminated, that the state, the king, should work for the upliftment of the poor. The poor people have to be uplifted. The state should work for the vulnerable sections. They believe that change has to happen in the society. So those who held this opinion, sitting on the left side of the king, these nobles and members, they represented left-wing ideology. They were pushing for a change. They would eventually challenge the authority of the king itself. They would advocate that the people should hold the power, not some leader, not just one leader. They also believed that lawmaking, governance should not be centralized, concentrated in the hands of the rich. It should be delegated, it should be decentralized. So those pushing for such social political changes, those advocating reforms who sat on the left side of the king, they represented left-wing ideology. This is where the concept originated from. But today, of course, there are different variations of it. There are so many political parties and political organizations. But eventually, if you look at them, if you look at their party ideology, if you look at the manifesto of the political parties, right, you can classify them into left-wing and right-wing organizations. Depending on what they believe in, what is their philosophy, what is their thought on different issues, we can classify different parties, organizations, and even religious groups as left-wing or right-wing. Is that clear? Today, we don't just have left-wing and right-wing ideology. In fact, we have many more classifications as well. We have the centrist political thought that is at the center of the political spectrum. Between centrist and left-wing ideology, we have left of center, which is a mix of left-wing ideology and centrist political thought. We have right of center, between right-wing and centrist ideology, which is a mix of both. Then finally, we have the extremist ideologies on both ends of the spectrum. We have right-wing extremism and left-wing extremism. So today, broadly, these are the different political ideologies that exist. You have the centrist political thought, left of center, right of center, left-wing and right-wing, left-wing extremism and right-wing extremism. Is that clear? Now, I will take some examples of major parties in the world, in India as well. We'll look at what is their political philosophy, what stand do they take on different issues, and accordingly, we will place them under different political ideologies in the spectrum. So then it becomes more clear to you. I'll also explain what happens when ideology swings towards extremism. All right? So that is the final discussion we should have. Now, under the centrist school of thought, which is a feature of progressive liberal democracies, it is seen in progressive liberal, developed democracies. In a way, this is kind of the perfect ideology for today. If you believe in the democratic order, for everyone who believes in democracy, right? This is indeed a perfect ideal ideology. This is something every society should strive for. But centrist political thought is largely a feature of developed countries, developed societies. All right? In Western democracies, for example, in highly developed industrialized economies, there are few centrist parties that exist. They are truly centrist political parties. They believe in more liberal ideas. They give utmost importance for fundamental rights, the right to equality, the liberty for free speech and expression, right? The right to religious freedom, the right to association, right to movement. They are truly practiced and followed in its 100% essence under these centrist parties. So, in Western European countries, like for example in Germany, in Belgium, Netherlands, also in the Nordic countries in Europe, like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, right? We also call them the Scandinavian countries. These are some of the most developed democracies today, the most developed economies and democracies. So, in these Western democracies, even in New Zealand, for example, there are few parties which are truly centrist parties. Their ideology is truly centrist. It's neither left wing nor right wing. They believe in a very balanced approach. They give utmost priority to liberalism, to democratic rights and fundamental rights. And they believe in change. They believe in reforms. They believe in striking a balance between the extremes of left wing and right wing. So, this is the centrist political thought that is usually seen in liberal democracies. There are few political parties in these countries which are truly centrist organizations. Is that clear? Now, I'll give this as a small assignment for you, a small homework. Find out the names of few centrist parties in the world. In India, by the way, there is no centrist party. In India or in developing nations, underdeveloped countries, you cannot find a truly centrist party, at least not the major ones. All the major parties in India, none of them are truly centrist in India. Is that clear? But in some developed democracies, especially in Western Europe and in some other developed countries, there are few parties which are truly centrist in their political thought. Understood? Now, let us look at right of center and right wing parties. Let's look at some examples. Let's look at what they believe in. Then we can compare this with left of center and left wing. Now, the perfect example for a right wing political party would be the Republican Party in the United States, the party that Donald Trump belongs to, the former president of the United States. Right? He belongs to the Republican Party, which is a right wing political organization of the United States. In India, if you're looking for examples of truly right wing political organizations, the example would be a party like Shiv Sena, then even religious organizations like the Jamaat, the RSS, and the others. So, such religious organizations, political parties, right, they can be classified as truly right wing organizations in India. Now, the ruling party in the country, the BJP, brands itself as a right of center party. But some of its ideology falls under right wing ideology as well. It's a mix of right wing and right of center. So the ruling party in India is essentially a right wing party, somewhere between right of center and right wing. All right. So these are the major parties that we have. Even if you look at other examples, I can say the AIADMK in Tamil Nadu is also a right of center or right wing political party. Then in Punjab, you have a party called the Shiromani Akali Dal. The Shiromani Akali Dal is also a right wing party. All right. So these are various examples. Now, if you look at United Kingdom, there you have the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party in UK. Another example for you. It's the party to which Rishi Sunak belongs to, the current Prime Minister of UK, Rishi Sunak. He is a Conservative member. He comes from the Conservative Party in the UK. So all these are examples of right-wing organizations. They lie somewhere between right of center and right wing. All right. Now, all their ideologies is acceptable. It is very much acceptable in a constitutional democracy. The ideology of Republican Party in the US, conservatives in the UK, the BJP in India, the RSS in India, the Shiv Sena in India, all their ideologies are well within the norms of a constitutional political democracy. All right. So this is where I would draw the line. This is where I would draw the line. This is where democracy ends on the right wing. The moment you cross this line, you are entering right-wing extremism, which cannot be tolerated in a civilized liberal democracy. Is that clear? I will explain. I'll take some issues maybe. I'll take a couple of issues and I'll explain what stand do right-wing organizations take. So then you get to know what features classifies a party or organization as a right-wing organization. We'll do the same for left-wing organizations as well. All right. So these are the examples in India and around the world. We can give many more examples, but this should be enough. So all these parties, they function within the norms of a democracy. Is that clear? They function within the norms of a democratic state. So their ideology is tolerated, allowed, legal in a democratic setup. Now, if you take an issue, let's say the issue of religion, tradition, and culture, towards the right wing, there is a high importance attached to these issues. So as you move towards the right, religion, culture, tradition becomes more and more important. Is that clear? So from the center, if you keep moving towards the right, religion, culture, and tradition becomes more and more important. So you will see that in the ideology and philosophy of these parties and organizations as well. Now, if you take, let's say, security, an issue like security. As you move towards the right wing, the issue of security acquires a lot of importance. And it reaches a stage where, in the name of security, in the name of patriotism, jingoism might be promoted. Jingoism is an extreme form of nationalism. So towards the right wing, national identity becomes important. Is that clear? The cultural identity, religious identity becomes very important. It could be ethnic identity as well, racial identity, or even religious identity, or even linguistic identity. They gain more and more importance as you move towards the right. So many of these states that are formed by right-wing organizations, they give extreme priority to security, patriotism, and it eventually becomes jingoism, which is an extreme form of nationalism, where you are asked to prove your nationalism, prove your patriotism. Is that clear? So that is something you see towards the right wing. Then usually on issues like environment, immigration, etc., right-wing organizations take a very conservative approach. Like Republicans in the US, for example, they oppose any kind of migration into US. They oppose the immigrants. They target illegal migrants. right? You saw what happened under Donald Trump. Donald Trump said we'll build a wall on the Mexico border to prevent illegal migration, right? Donald Trump said that migrants are a threat, the immigrants are a threat to the country. That is something you find as a feature in right-wing ideology. There is a certain what do you say, a certain hatred that is developed towards outsiders, towards foreigners, when you move towards the right wing. All right. So the focus is on building a single national identity, building a nation on the lines of religion or ethnicity or racial lines. That is one feature of right wing ideology. Even if you look at environmental issues, usually right wing parties and organizations are pro industry and anti environment, usually, but there can be exceptions. Now, for example, if you look at Donald Trump, he didn't believe in climate change. He dismissed climate change as a conspiracy theory. He completely favored the capitalists, the industries. In Brazil, there was one controversial leader, a good friend of Donald Trump, the former president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro. You would have heard about him. He was another right-wing leader, very controversial right-wing leader of Brazil. He dismissed any environmental concern. He gave away forest land to industries and capitalists and allowed them to burn the Amazon forest. He dismissed climate change as a conspiracy theory. So that is one feature that you find towards right wing. As you move more towards the right wing, you see that environment gets a lesser priority. Environmental issues get less priority. Even gender issues get less priority. All right, that is a common feature that you find in right-wing ideology. But the capitalists, that is the industry, security forces, they usually get higher priority towards the right wing. That is one feature that you find. But again, there are exceptions, as I told you. Now, if you look at the BJP in India, the BJP is very committed to environmental issues. Prime Minister Modi has personally championed several environmental initiatives, right? PM Modi launched the International Solar Alliance. India is very actively participating in all climate change summits. We have contributed to climate action efforts. India is achieving its voluntary targets under Paris Agreement. So that's why I told you there can be exceptions. India's BJP is an exception in that regard, in terms of environment. But with regard to culture, tradition, religion, nationalism, security issues, gender issues, right, and favoring the industry, that is one common feature that you find towards the right wing. As you move more towards the right, these are some traits that you find. Is that clear? So similarly, if an individual has the same belief and thought, we can call that person a right-wing individual. We can say that this person believes in right of center ideology or right-wing ideology. And trust me, there's nothing wrong with it. All these ideologies are tolerable in a democracy. They are very much legal, very much part of a constitutional democracy. All right? But the moment you cross this line, because as you move more towards the right, you see a reactionary strain developing. You come across certain organizations, political, religious organizations, which become reactionary and they don't hesitate to commit violence in the name of their ideology, in the name of their religion, their ethnicity, their language, or their race. For example, you have several organizations that commit violence in the name of religion, right? Or organizations committing violence in the name of language, organizations committing violence in the name of ethnicity. So the moment you come across reactionary violence, the reactionary elements, then you're crossing this barrier, crossing this boundary, and entering towards right-wing extremism. Now, for example, the Shiv Sena in Maharashtra, it's built on the Maratha identity. I'm sure you know that Shiv Sena has often targeted outsiders. It has targeted migrant workers from Bihar and UP. It has targeted Kannadigas with regard to the Belgaum dispute. So when you find such reactionary approach by a party or organization, they're crossing that line, that reactionary line. And if you move beyond this, you enter the extremist path. Is that clear? So there are several organizations, political, religious organizations, that have turned their ideology into extremism, right-wing extremism. So right-wing extremism is inspired either by religious fundamentalism or based on ethnic, racial superiority, or even based on linguistic superiority. So if someone is committing polarization of the society in the name of religion, ethnicity, race, and language, if someone is committing violence in the name of religion, ethnicity, race, and language, they are basically right-wing extremists. Is that clear? For example, organizations like SIMI, the Students Islamic Movement of India. It was like a NGO before. At one point in 1980s, 90s, it was a NGO kind of an organization. But in the late 90s, it turned into a right-wing extremist organization. It misinterpreted religion and directly contributed to terrorism in India. Then groups like the Bajrang Dal, the various radical Hindutva organizations, which also commit violence in the name of religion, which act as reactionary elements, they fall into the right-wing extremist category. Right? Now, if you take this to the further extreme, this is where you come across radical terrorist organizations. So right-wing extremism built on radical religion, radical ethnicity, racial superiority, linguistic superiority can lead to terrorism, can lead to dictatorship, and it can lead to the rise of a fascist state. Is that clear? The best example here would be Nazi Germany. The Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler. Hitler was a dictator. He built his image largely through propaganda. He was projected as the savior of Germany. Right? There was extensive propaganda by the Nazi party that Germany is being targeted by every country. And there was extensive propaganda against minorities, especially the Jews, the communists. They were blamed for all the problems of Germany. And Hitler was projected as the savior, as the god who could save the country. So whenever you see that a leader is being projected as the supreme leader, as a hero who could save the whole nation from all threats, internal and external threats, that is a classic propaganda to promote dictatorship. So Hitler's Germany was largely built on hatred. It was built on ethnic, racial superiority, that the so-called Aryan race is superior to the Jews, superior to other minorities. And that explains why the Jews were targeted. A genocide was committed by Nazi Germany under Hitler's dictatorship, where millions of Jews were exterminated. This is what you witness towards right-wing extremism. Is that clear? So, Islamic State, the Taliban, and various similar terror organizations, they all fall under the same category. Right? They believe in extreme form of religion. They believe that their strand of Sunni Islam, which is actually a misinterpreted, wrong version of Islam, that is Wahhabism, Salafism, they believe this is the most superior form of religion. Right? So many terrorist groups like ISIS, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, they all believe that this strand of Sunni Islam is the only superior religion, and those who don't follow this, they're all treated as kafirs, as non-believers, as infidels. And they believe that they should engage in violence, they should take up jihad to protect their ideology, to target others. They don't just target other religions like Christianity, Hinduism, or Buddhism, or Sikhism. They target Muslims as well. They will target Shias, they'll target Hazaras, they'll target Sunni Muslims as well who don't believe in Wahhabism and Salafism. So any such radical strand of religion, ethnic, racial superiority, linguistic superiority, leading to terrorism, fascism, and dictatorship is right-wing extremism. And there is no place for such right-wing ideology in any kind of modern democracy. That's why I said this is the boundary. The moment you cross this boundary, reactionary elements turn to violence and eventually engage in terrorism, dictatorship, and fascism. Is that clear? But anything before that, that is from center to right wing, all these ideologies are perfectly legal, allowed, and tolerable in a modern civilized state. Now, the same happens towards the left wing. Left wing and left of center are legal, tolerable ideologies in a democracy. But the moment you cross this line here, all right, let's say the moment this line is crossed, the moment the ideology turns radical, you see the rise of left-wing extremism. Left-wing extremism is as dangerous as right-wing extremism. It's not that one is better than the other. Both forms of extremism result in dictatorship, result in violation of human rights and democratic rights. They result in terrorism, violence. Is that clear? Left-wing extremism is largely a political ideology. That is the difference. If right-wing extremism is built on religious extremism or ethnic racial extremism, then left-wing extremism is built on political extremism. Is that clear? That is the difference that exists. So under left-wing ideology, if you look at left of center and left wing, there is a greater priority given for social change. These are not status quoist elements. These are reform elements, pro-reform elements. They want upliftment of the masses. They want the poor, vulnerable sections to be uplifted. They want environmental issues to be given a higher priority. So as you move towards the left, some characteristics that you find, some traits that you find is that, some important traits that you find here is that religion, nationalism, then even let's say security issues, culture and tradition, they all get a lesser priority towards the left wing. Left wing largely believes that the whole world is one state. So national identities are not too important here. It's not that a nation should be built on one religious identity or one racial ethnic identity. These identities get erased towards the left wing. There is more faith towards the left wing in the good of the humanity. So obviously they oppose religious orthodoxy. Towards right wing, you find more orthodoxy. Towards left wing, you find opposition against orthodoxy. So they don't prioritize religious values, culture, tradition gets a lesser importance, right? Or rather, religious freedom is promoted and even atheism is promoted. Having no faith is also acceptable. Respecting others' faith is also acceptable. So religion gets a lesser importance, extreme nationalism gets a lesser importance, but there could be a compromise on security. There could be a compromise on security. But if you look at other issues, like let's say environmental issues or gender issues, tribal issues, for example, issues related to the poor and vulnerable classes, they acquire more importance towards the left wing. All right? This can be both good and bad. I'm not judging any ideology here. I'm not saying left wing is better than right wing is better than left wing. No, that's not for us to judge. Personally, I can. Personally, have a right to have my own political belief. You also have a right to have your own political belief. But We can't judge which ideology is better than the other, right? In a classroom environment, we can't judge which ideology is better than the other. They have their own pros and cons. But what cannot be tolerated is extremism. We can't tolerate left-wing extremism. We can't tolerate right-wing extremism as well. Both are equally dangerous to a civilized democracy. So towards the left wing, ideally, environmental issues are given more importance, meaning industries might be given lesser importance. Capitalists might be given lesser importance. Gender issues get more priority. Equal treatment for women. Tribal issues, issues affecting the poor, the farmers get more priority towards the left. But again, a strong belief in these principles could compromise growth. It could affect growth prospects. If you come out only with those policies which provide for environment protection, then if you just provide free benefits for the poor people to uplift them, it might compromise growth, economic growth, right? So there are pros and cons. Just like right-wing ideology has pros and cons, left-wing ideology also has pros and cons to it. All right? But that is the general trait that you find. So there is a greater inclination towards left-wing for reforms. Left-wing ideology is largely built on changing the social order, creating a more equal order, because the ideology is inspired by communism. Communism, which is a political philosophy built on the ideas of Karl Marx and many, many other communist thinkers and philosophers, believed in an equal society, believed in obliterating the class divide between the rich and the poor. It believed in promoting the welfare of the worker class. It believed in undermining the capitalists who concentrate power and wealth, and in distributing wealth to the weaker sections. But communism has been given many wrong interpretations as well, many radical extremist interpretations as well. So communism, as it believes in the rule of the commune, where it's believed that the state should own all the resources and the wealth, the state will work for the welfare of the people, state will work for the upliftment of the poor, the weaker classes. On theory, on paper, it looks like a great idea, but many times in implementation it has gone wrong. Because when state is cornering all the wealth and resources, giving itself all the powers over the distribution of wealth and all the decision making powers to itself, even this results in rise of dictatorship and extremism. I'll give you examples for that as well. Now, let's look at examples for left wing ideology in India and around the world. The Democrats in the US, the party to which Obama belongs to, the party to which current President Joe Biden belongs to, it is a left of center party. If Republican Party is a right wing party, the Democrats in the US are a left of center party. Is that clear? In India, a left of center party would be the Indian National Congress. The Congress party in India is a left of center party. Is that clear? Then, if you look at examples for left wing organizations, parties like CPI Marxist, I'm sure you would have heard about CPI Marxist. The CPI Marxist is politically active in some states, especially like Kerala, West Bengal, Tripura. It has won elections, formed state governments as well. It's mainly inspired by the communist ideology of Karl Marx. So CPI Marxist is a left-wing party. Even the Aam Aadmi Party, the AAP, can be seen as a left-wing party. The DMK in Tamil Nadu can be seen as a left-wing party. The Trinamool Congress, the TMC in West Bengal, can be seen as a left-wing party. The Janata Dal, then the BSP, and even SP in UP. They're all left of center or left wing parties. They fall somewhere between this. All right. Then in United Kingdom, you have the Labour Party in the UK, which is a left of center party. All right. So all these major parties of the world can be classified as left wing organizations. Now, can you see the green lines that I have drawn? Whatever lies within the green line, they're all acceptable, tolerable in a constitutional democracy. So from CPI Marxist to RSS, from Indian National Congress to BJP, from Democrats to Republicans, from DMK to AIADMK, all these parties, organizations, their ideologies, they are completely legal. They are tolerable in a constitutional civilized democracy because they don't believe in violence. But the moment they cross this line, if the ideology becomes reactionary, more radical, it will breach this barrier and enter the path of extremism. We studied right-wing extremism, how it leads to fascism, dictatorship, the rise of a dictator built on propaganda, how it could lead to religious terrorism, ethnic, racial violence, linguistic violence. Similarly, towards left-wing extremism, it results in dictatorship, violence, and terrorism. Have you heard about Mao Zedong? Have you heard about Joseph Stalin, Lenin? All these are popular left-wing extremist leaders, communist dictators. In China, the People's Republic of China that you have today, there was a communist movement in 1930s, 1940s. This was the Chinese Civil War, where the communists led by Mao Zedong, who laid the foundation of Maoism. It is an extreme form of communism that was promoted by Mao Zedong. This ideology is inherently a violent, radical ideology, an extremist ideology. Mao Zedong, the leader of the Communist Party of China, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, he gave a call for the farmers, the peasants, and workers to rebel against the Republic of China. This triggered a civil war in China, and eventually the Maoists, who are the followers of Maoism, they won the civil war and captured the authority, captured state power. Republic of China was thrown out. The government, Republic of China, was thrown out into Taiwan. The Kuomintang Party, the KMT, was removed from power, thrown out into Taiwan, and mainland China was brought under the control of the Maoists. Is that clear? The Communist Party of China, under the influence of Maoism, took control of mainland China. So this ideology, which inherently promotes violence, which is a radical extremist ideology promoting authoritarianism, dictatorship, is a type of left-wing extremism. Similarly, in Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin, during the World War period, Lenin, they committed brutal atrocities, killing millions of people under their dictatorship, as they believed in extreme form of communism, which is far away from what Karl Marx had promoted. That is why Marxist communist ideology is acceptable in a democracy. In India, we have a perfect example, the CPI Marxist. It's a legal party. It's contesting elections, believing in democracy, forming state governments as well. There are CPI Marxist MPs in the parliament because Marxist ideology is not violent. In fact, it's a great revolutionary ideology that is rooted in communism and socialism. Socialism is the economic model of communism. In communism, the belief is that the state should own the resources. It's the rule of the commune, where the state determines what is good for the people. The state controls all manners of production. The state sets targets for all industries, what to produce, how much to produce. The state will place restrictions on imports and exports, controlling the economy. So such a state-controlled economy is a socialist economy, which even India followed at one point. From 1950s to 1990s, we were also largely a socialist economy with a mixture of capitalism, right? In democracy, usually the economic model followed is capitalism. But the opposite of that is socialism in communist political ideology. Is that clear? If democracy largely believes in capitalism, if democracy is built on largely the capitalist economic model, where industries, private owners can own land and resources, right? Where private enterprises can own all the manners of production. In communism, where the socialist model is followed, there is no scope for private enterprise. There's no concept of private ownership. State owns everything. State owns the land, the minerals, the resources, the wealth, and controls the economy completely. All right? On paper, it sounds like a great idea because such a state can distribute those resources, ensure that the poor are uplifted, and it can create an equal society. But in reality, the ideology doesn't work because such a communist socialist state eventually becomes a dictatorship. We have seen this happening in China, in Soviet Union and Russia, and there are many more examples. If leaders like Mao Zedong, Stalin, Lenin come up, they will create a hero image. Just like Hitler, a right-wing dictator who created a fascist state, just like Mussolini in Italy, just like Imperial Japan, which became right-wing fascist dictatorships. Similarly, these left-wing leaders as well create a cult image around them. Because even in left-wing extremism, there is heavy dependency on propaganda. The state carries out so much propaganda that people are made to believe that their leader is supreme, their leader is everything, the leader is God. Look at North Korea, Kim Jong-un. Look at the image, the cult hero image that has been built around Kim Jong-un in North Korea. North Korea is a communist state, an extremist communist state. Look at the hero image surrounding Xi Jinping in China currently. Xi Jinping has solidified his power status. And as you know, in China, there are no democratic rights, no fundamental rights. There is no freedom of speech, no freedom of expression, no freedom of press. There is no right to life. The state is everything. The party is everything. Communist states are single party states. The Communist Party is in power. There are no other political parties. And there is extensive propaganda to cultivate a hero image, to build the image of the leader. And this again turns into a dictatorship. Results in violence, results in terrorism as well. If you look at what Lenin and Stalin did, they killed lakhs of people. Even under Mao Zedong, several people suffered, millions of them suffered, because it leads to brutality of the state. It leads to authoritarian rule. That's what happens when you don't have democracy, when there are no fundamental rights. I think now you can appreciate the beauty of India, the beauty of Indian democracy, the beauty of the Indian constitution. If the land is free today, if we are free citizens of this land, the credit goes to the Constitution of India, the freedom struggle of India, the far-sightedness of our constitution makers, the founding fathers of India, from Gandhi to Nehru to Sardar Patel to Subhash Chandra Bose. They laid the foundation of a democratic, free, liberal India that would allow for different ideologies to flourish. So all forms of extremism, they are equally dangerous. Left-wing extremism, which is a political extremism, is as dangerous as right-wing extremism. Right-wing extremism built on religious fundamentalism, ethnic racial superiority, leads to terrorism and fascism, as we have seen in Germany, in Afghanistan, in various other parts of the world. So what is allowed, what is tolerable, is left-wing to right-wing ideology. Left-wing, left of center, center, right of center, right-wing. All these ideologies present within the green line, they are tolerable in a liberal, civilized society or a democracy. Anything outside of it is extremism and they cannot be tolerated. It results in violence, results in terrorism and dictatorship. All right. So this is the basic idea that you should have before we can even continue this discussion. Because these topics will keep coming up. We will be discussing religious fundamentalism. We will be talking about left-wing extremism. So having this basic idea is extremely important. So I hope it is clear for everyone. Now we can take a short break. Let's take a 15 minutes break. It's 7:45. Let's come back at 8 a.m. I'll take your questions and doubts, and then we'll start with the next topic. We'll understand the linkages between development and extremism. And based on that, we will study Naxalism in India. So I'll see you in 15 minutes.